Imagine this. In the dead of night, on the streets of New York, a man suddenly appears, disoriented, his clothing strangely out of place, as though he had stepped straight from a distant past into the present. Everything about him is unusual, his bewildered gaze, his anxious movements, and most of all, his attire, unmistakably from another century. He seems like someone who has slipped through the cracks of time, a wanderer between worlds, or perhaps a lost fragment of a forgotten age. What happened next was more than just a tragic accident. It became the spark that ignited one of the most baffling mysteries of modern times. The story of Rudolph Fentz. Was he a time traveler, the victim of an unexplainable rift in reality, or simply the invention of an urban legend? The truth behind his appearance remains as captivating as it is elusive. It was a warm summer evening in June 1950 when New York City became the backdrop for a shocking and unexplainable event. The streets around Times Square buzzed with life. Crowds hurried along the sidewalks, car horns blared, in chorus with the steady hum of the city, and neon lights cast their vibrant glow over the bustling scene. But amid this familiar urban rhythm, something extraordinary happened, something that shattered the normal flow of the night. Eyewitnesses spoke of a man who appeared seemingly out of nowhere, right in the middle of one of the city's busiest intersections. His appearance was like a vision from another era. A tall, black bowler hat, a long frock coat, a waistcoat, and striped trousers. Clothing that undeniably belonged to the late 19th century. But the clothing worn by this man, later identified as Rudolph Fentz, was not merely outdated. It was immaculate, as if it had just been picked up from an upscale tailor's shop. There were no signs of wear, no fading fabric, nothing to suggest that these garments had endured the passage of time. This baffling detail sparked an incredible question. Had he truly stepped straight out of the past and into the present? In his hand, he held a gleaming gold pocket watch, its chain catching the glow of the streetlights. His face was a mask of confusion and fear, the expression of someone who had suddenly found himself in a world that was not his own. Witnesses reported more than just his disoriented state. They described his anxious, uneasy behavior. He seemed both fascinated and deeply unsettled by his surroundings. The roaring cars, the glowing neon signs, the restless energy of the city, everything appeared alien to him, as though he had been thrust into a world he could not comprehend. Several people claimed he tried to speak with passers-by, but his words were peculiar. He spoke in an overly formal, almost antiquated form of English, like echoes from a distant past. But before anyone could truly react, the unthinkable happened. The man suddenly stepped into the chaotic flow of traffic, as if he had no understanding of the danger rushing toward him. A car tried to stop, but there was no time. The impact was brutal and unavoidable. That single, tragic moment would ignite one of the most perplexing mysteries of the 20th century. Hubert Ram, a veteran investigator with the New York Police Department, was tasked with unraveling the mystery behind this bizarre case. As he sifted through the man's personal effects, he uncovered a series of astonishing items, artifacts that were not merely old-fashioned, but utterly out of place in the year 1950. Among them were a gold pocket watch engraved with delicate initials, a letter written on aged, yellowed paper bearing a postmark from 1876, banknotes from the 19th century, long obsolete and no longer in circulation. Experts who carefully examined these objects confirmed beyond doubt that they originated from the 19th century. Neither the pocket watch, the letter, nor the banknotes showed any traces of aging or signs of forgery. This impeccable authenticity further cemented the credibility of the case, stirring up even more questions that, to this day, remain without answers. The business cards bore the name Rudolph Fentz, along with an address that was verified to have existed in the 1870s, but has since been overtaken by modern buildings. A lead guided the investigator to an address on Fifth Avenue, printed on one of the business cards. Yet, any hope for a definitive answer was swiftly shattered. The building's current owner, visibly perplexed, insisted he had never heard of a Rudolph Fentz. What seemed like a breakthrough only led deeper into the darkness of this perplexing case. The banknotes also appeared to be from the 19th century, long out of circulation, yet remarkably well preserved. The letter bore a postmark from 1876 and was addressed to Rudolph Fentz. It detailed an appointment Fentz had arranged for the very evening he disappeared. Most astonishingly, the date on the letter aligned exactly with the day he was officially reported missing. The objects appeared as though they had been plucked directly from the 19th century and delivered, untouched, into the present day. Their discovery not only fueled speculation about the possibility of time travel, but also gave rise to a flood of unsettling questions. Were these items undeniable proof that the story was real, or had someone orchestrated an elaborate hoax? But the case took an even stranger turn in the days following Rudolph Fentz's tragic death. Several of the recovered items mysteriously vanished from police storage without a trace. This baffling disappearance stirred new waves of suspicion. Rumors of cover-ups and deliberate evidence tampering began to spread. Had someone been trying to conceal the truth? The police investigation grew increasingly perplexing. The name Rudolph Fentz was found in neither current phone directories nor address records. His fingerprints yielded no matches, and no missing person report had ever been filed. It was as though he had simply materialized from thin air, a ghost who had stepped into reality for a brief, tragic moment. But investigator Rim was not so easily deterred. He spent hours scouring records, determined to find a trace of the man. Finally, he stumbled upon a lead. In a dusty old phone book from 1939, he found an entry for a Rudolph Fentz Jr. It was a breakthrough, or so it seemed. Instead of bringing clarity, this discovery opened the door to yet another mystery. Determined to uncover the truth, Rim delved deeper into the city's archives. He combed through old records, hoping to find anything that could explain the impossible. His search led him to an aged, yellowed file, over 70 years old, documenting a missing persons case from 1876. According to the report, a man named Rudolph Fentz had vanished without a trace one summer evening while out for a walk. He had simply stepped out of his home and was never seen again. The description of the man in those old police records aligned with unsettling accuracy to the appearance of the deceased found at Times Square, his clothing, the gold pocket watch, and even the details of his personal background. The trail ultimately led Rim to a woman who was identified as the widow of Rudolph Fentz Jr. In their conversation, she revealed a detail that would push the investigation to the brink of the impossible. Her late husband had often spoken of his father, Rudolph Fentz, who had vanished without a trace one evening in 1876. According to family accounts, he had gone out for a walk and never returned. What left Rim truly stunned was the widow's description of the missing man. It matched perfectly with the appearance of the stranger who had mysteriously emerged at Times Square in 1950. The clothing, the gold pocket watch, even the other personal belongings. Every detail aligned exactly with the descriptions passed down through the family. This discovery confronted Captain Rim with an even more baffling question. How could a man from the 19th century suddenly appear in the mid-20th century, as though he had crossed the barrier of time itself? Some researchers have suggested that Times Square might be a hotspot for temporal anomalies. This theory is supported by various accounts of strange lights and individuals who reportedly found themselves out of time, as though they had been briefly displaced from their own era. Could it be that Rudolph Fentz truly stepped across the barrier of time? Or does his case conceal an even deeper, more elusive truth? What began as a tragic accident quickly evolved into a mystery that defied the limits of time and reality. The discovery of his belongings fanned the flames of speculation, giving rise to a web of extraordinary theories. Time travel. The most popular theory suggests that Rudolph Fentz was transported from the year 1876 into 1950 by some unexplained anomaly. Supporters of this idea point to the compelling evidence: the pristine 19th century clothing, the personal belongings, and the undeniable match with the old missing persons records. To many, the conclusion seems clear. Fentz was a real-time traveler. Others, however, believe that the story of Rudolph Fentz is nothing more than a cleverly crafted myth, an urban legend designed to captivate and deceive. But can the mystery truly be dismissed so easily? Skeptics are often quick to label time travel as impossible. Yet, modern physics suggests otherwise. Subatomic particles have been observed moving both forward and backward through time, and theoretical models confirm that traveling into the future is not just a fantasy, it is scientifically plausible. Could this mean that the case of Rudolph Fentz holds more truth than we dare to believe? Parallel realities. Another theory proposes that Rudolph Fentz may have crossed over from an alternate reality. Perhaps the boundaries between his world and ours briefly blurred, causing him to appear, suddenly and inexplicably, in the middle of the 20th century. If true, his arrival could be a rare glimpse into the existence of parallel worlds, realities that run alongside our own, occasionally colliding in ways we barely understand. Hoax or urban legend. Science writer Chris Albeck suggested that the story of Rudolph Fentz likely originated from the 1951 science fiction short story I'm Scared by Jack Finney. The parallels between Finney's narrative and the Fentz account are striking, leading many to believe that the tale was nothing more than a well-crafted hoax, one that gradually evolved into a modern urban legend. For decades, the mystery of Rudolph Fentz was widely dismissed as fiction, a clever fabrication that captured the public imagination. But in 2007, the case took an unexpected turn. A researcher in Berlin's news archives discovered a newspaper article from April 1951, 5 months before Finney's short story was published. The article described the case of Rudolph Fentz in almost identical detail, suggesting the story had circulated independently before Finney's fictional version appeared. Was this merely coincidence? Or could it be the key to proving that the legend of Rudolph Fentz is rooted in something far more real? Unexplained mix-up. Some skeptics suggest that the story may have been the result of deliberate deception or a simple case of confusion. It's possible that the account was later embellished with fictional details, designed to keep the mystery alive and fuel public fascination. But even if the tale did originate from literary fiction or exaggeration, certain questions refuse to be silenced. How could a man carrying such specific, historically accurate items, completely out of place in 1950, suddenly appear in the heart of New York City? And why did both his belongings and his description so perfectly match a real missing persons report from the 19th century? Reality or myth? The story of Rudolph Fentz endures as one of the most fascinating mysteries, leaving more questions than answers to this day. Despite the efforts of skeptics and historians to debunk the case as mere fiction or urban legend, the core of the story refuses to disappear. A man, seemingly from another century, emerges in the heart of 1950s New York, carrying objects from a forgotten era, leaving traces that defy explanation to this day. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect is the inexplicable gap between his disappearance and his sudden reappearance, a void stretching over 70 years. There are no records from the 1870s that point to anything unusual about Rudolph Fentz's disappearance. No witnesses, no strange phenomena, nothing to suggest his later appearance in 1950 was tied to an extraordinary event. Captain Rim's meticulous investigation did confirm that Fentz had been officially reported missing, but there was no sign that his vanishing was anything other than an ordinary case of a man who never came home. No mysterious lights, no supernatural disturbance, just an evening walk that ended in silence, and a man who vanished without a trace. Another even deeper question surrounding this mystery is, how could a time traveler physically cross from one era to another? There were no reports of a flash of light, no tremor in the ground, and no strange phenomenon that might suggest the fabric of time had been disturbed. No portal, no burst of energy, nothing. Rudolph Fentz simply appeared, out of nowhere, as if he had bypassed the boundaries of time itself. It is this complete absence of any visible trace of a transition that makes the enigma all the more impenetrable. How could a man step from one century into another without leaving the faintest mark on reality? It is precisely these questions that shroud the story in an almost palpable sense of the unknown, urging us to consider: do we truly understand the limits of time and space? Some speculate that the items found on Rudolph Fentz were deliberately planted, part of a carefully constructed ruse designed to create confusion and intrigue. According to this theory, the entire incident may have been an elaborate hoax, orchestrated either to capture public attention or to divert it from more pressing matters. Yet, as compelling as this idea may seem, it remains nothing more than speculation. To this day, no concrete evidence has ever emerged to prove that the Fentz case was a stage deception. Even if parts of the story are steeped in fiction, the case of Rudolph Fentz has long taken on a life of its own. It continues to be held up as proof, a possible window into the reality of time travel or parallel worlds. To this day, many believe the story contains a deeper truth, a haunting reminder that there may be forces at work beyond our understanding, waiting to be unraveled. But the central question endures: who was Rudolph Fentz? Was he truly a man who, through some inexplicable phenomenon, traveled across time? Or is his tale nothing more than the fabric of urban legend? Even today, no definitive answer has surfaced, but the fascination remains unbroken. The case of Rudolph Fentz compels us to question the limits of our reality and to rethink what we deem impossible. Do you think Rudolph Fentz was a real time traveler? Or is it just an urban legend? Share your opinion in the comments.